Hello, this is Shan Chandrasekhar welcoming you to another delightful part of our programming. As part of the Achievers, we featured some of the finest, highly accomplished people from around the world. We are very delighted to present an outstanding Canadian who has made a great contribution to this country with respect to preserving law and order. He's made an extraordinary commitment for nearly 38 years, the former Chief of Police of Toronto, none other than Mr. Mark Saunders, who has got about 38 years of experience, as I said. In addition to that, he led one of the largest police forces in this country with over 7,400 officers and civilians, and with a budget of about $1 billion, not a million, $1 billion. Welcome to the program. What an honor to receive you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You really worked your way up. You came from the grassroots level. So tell us about your early entry in the police force.
I had no interest in policing at all. And so I don't have that fascinating story about an officer coming into the classroom one day. I was just walking through the cafeteria, grade 13, back when we had grade 13. And a person was sitting at the table with his friends talking about how his father was a police officer and he was going to be one. And my friend with me at the time said, you know what, you'd make a really good cop. And I said, why do you think so? And his answer was, because you're fair. And it really clicked, because yeah, I'm very fair, I've been raised properly, and so having a job that is exciting every day, is new and different, was an interest. I was disc jockeying before. As soon as I left high school, I was disc jockeying. But I eventually got into the Toronto Police. It was then the Metropolitan Toronto Police Force in 1982. And after a while, I was walking the beat, had the opportunity of, up through the years, getting into the detective office, the major crime office. I tried to get promoted a couple of times unsuccessfully. And I wound up going to the drug squad, doing undercover work, and the fugitive squad, which is fascinating, chasing criminals that have harbored in Canada, who have committed real horrible crimes in other countries. And then I wound up at the ETF. I was there for a period of time. I got promoted, and then I went back to the emergency task force, which is, the Americans call it the SWAT team. So I did several years on the team. Wow. And then I got called back to run a team. But investigations was something that was really near and dear to my heart. And so I had the opportunity of making it in homicide. And Homicide Squad was where I served my longest term. And if we're going to talk about where I learned the most about anything, life skills, the importance of victimization, I would say that Homicide Squad really was the biggest learning point in my life and in my journey. But I proceeded through there, and I wound up working at Professional Standards, which is a spot where you investigate police officers. When I got promoted out of there, I wound up working in 12th Division. And in that area, at the time, was one of the most poverty-stricken neighborhoods. It was in the northwest area of the city, and really learned to understand the importance of connecting with community there. And when I got promoted to deputy chief, I had all of the specialized, because of my investigative background in the drug squad and in homicide, the mounted, the horses, the dogs, the specialists in traffic services, and the Marine unit. So that was fun. Working in and overseeing those people, really hard, dedicated workers, as well as the front line. And then eventually in 2015, I had the opportunity of becoming the chief of police for five and a bit years, and it was exciting. It was exciting to work really hard, fail a lot, learn from failure, and then have the opportunity of being in the seat of chief of police.
When you were appointed as the chief of police, you were the first black gentleman to be appointed as the chief of police in the history of Toronto. Yeah. How did it make you feel? Because one of the largest police forces in this country.
It felt great. When you take the whole journey and when you see things that you think could be done differently. My parents taught me that in order to make change, you have to be at the decision-making table. And that's the way life is. If there is any government change, you have to get to the decision-making table. And the same with the police agency. And I had a unique lens to offer. You know, living as a black man in Canada, it's a different experience. You learn certain things, and from those learning abilities and understanding that journey, having that extra lens in the office of the chief really gave me another aspect of looking at things, especially when it comes to the transparency, the accountability, and the training. Training is key and critical. You have to understand that when you're in a community, you are part of the community. And how you affect one person can really compromise how you affect an entire community. But you have to understand their journey. And if you can understand their journey, and if you're objective, you'll start adding value to that community.
You just mentioned about your parents. You know, tell me about your upbringing, because I know your parents were born in Jamaica, but you were born in England.
My parents had 6 kids. They basically, their journey started in Jamaica, and where everybody looked like them. And then they moved to England, and that's where the other 3 kids were born. So 3 were born in Jamaica, the last 3 were born in England. I was the 5th of the 6th, I was the youngest boy. And then we came to Canada. And I remember asking my dad just prior to him passing, which was a couple of years ago, and I asked him, because I couldn't understand, you know, Dad, why did you leave from Jamaica to England and then come here? And he said, listen, when I was in England, I was trying to purchase property. I wanted property. And he said, I felt that country really would not, they were making it very hard for people of color to purchase land. So he came here, and we stayed here. And we've never left. And it has been a fantastic country, a country that has really given opportunity. And I'd never had the opportunity of ever being the chief of police without my parents having the bravery to make that decision to come here.
You know, they say in life, money means power, but in the absence of money, presence means power. By virtue of the fact that you became the chief of police, yeah. How did that influence the society and the police force with respect to looking at visible minorities in the city?
Well, first, how it reflected on me. Because whenever I had a learning moment, it would cause me to remember that I had to make it a teachable moment. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. I remember when I was running Homicide, and there was a homicide conference from people from all across Canada and some international presence. Uh-huh. My best friend at the time, he was actually my partner for years in Homicide. We're walking down the hallway to this hotel, and there was a group of people, and within the group was someone that worked for me, and he turned around and he went, "Oh, there's my boss." And as we were walking up, the gentleman extended his hand to my friend, uh-huh. Not me. Uh-huh. So here was the built-in assumption uh-huh. that he had already assumed that the person that was running Homicide was a person that was white. Mm-hmm. So understanding that a lot of this implicit bias, where people can look at you and basically position you, uh-huh. You have to understand that every time you walk into the room, you come with a deficit, just of how you look. So the more people that wind up in positions of power, the less likelihood people are going to make the assumption of what status you have. Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes a teachable moment, mm-hmm. where, implicit bias can have effect on behavior.
Wow.
And when you're dealing in an industry mm-hmm. where you can take somebody's liberty, uh-huh. if that implicit bias is turned into an action, then we have a huge problem. Mm-hmm. So learning how to teach is so critical and important. Most officers have good intentions. They join to save lives, to make a positive difference, but there are times when you have to teach. You have to have an understanding. You have to remove as many assumptions as possible and try your very best to be objective in every single encounter. But it speaks to the journeys that I had to take. And even up to last year, my wife, who is white, started to understand a little better when I would walk into certain stores, department stores, and security would follow me around. My wife would step back and watch, and she would always get mad and upset at this.
Wow.
But the only advantage that I would have is I would call the security person over and identify who I was, and then give that person a lesson in what they're doing is wrong.
Fantastic.
So we're a great country, and don't get me wrong. It is still a country of opportunity.
Right.
You have to take these moments
Yeah.
to teach, to educate. You can get mad and feel upset. It's the microaggressions that cause that when it is happening a multitude of times. But the more you can get, as I said, to that decision-making table and then have influence on more people,
Right.
then more people have a better understanding. That sphere of training
Right.
has greater magnitude, and it helps make us as a city, as a country, become the city that it should be.
You know, obviously you're extraordinarily well-read and highly cultured to be able to really distinguish the difference between, in terms of how to handle those situations. Unfortunately, not everybody is in that bracket. So what you did, you actually became a mentor. You were part of a committee that set up in terms of, you know, recognizing and helping out people who have this issue. Tell me about that committee that you were a mentor.
Oh, you know, Sham, I have been a mentor of so many different committees when it comes to the training, the type of training. I mean, one of the entities that I brought in was diversity and inclusion. And that was about taking this seriously. And within that, looking at every single training component that the organization had to have, and putting a racialized lens through each and every one of them, removing all of the implicit bias, removing any overt bias, and making sure that it was screened and looked over properly, so that we have to take things from its most fundamental levels when it comes to that.
You know, they always say in life, in even medical profession, prevention is better than cure. Now, obviously, you've done quite a bit of preventive work as well in the police force. The rate of recidivism is also somewhat high in the hardcore criminals that have been there. And do you feel that sometimes there's a judicial discrepancy in this country, where Canadians are the nicest people in the world, but they are a little too nice sometimes? And do you feel sometimes that's frustrating to the law enforcement authorities when somebody is granted a parole prematurely or released while that person can still be dangerous out in the community?
Well, I'm glad I don't have to fight that fight anymore, and Chief Demke has that. But I can tell you that bail reform is an issue, and it was an issue. And in 2018, if not sooner, it was very hard, especially the communities that were dealing with gun violence. And you can take the city, and 40% of the gun violence was happening in the northwest end of the city. That's a high number. But when you ask the community to do their job, and they do, and somebody is arrested for any type of violent crime, especially the gun violent crime, and they're back out in next to no time before trial has happened, you're putting the public back in danger again. So that catch and release that was going on, that was up to recently that they've now said that they're going to take a look at it. It's unfortunate that it has taken this long, but there's still some strands in it that I think could be done a little bit better. It's a starting point to really address, government has a role to make sure that communities are safe, but it starts by listening to the communities and listening to the experts in law and what they're saying and what they're seeing, and then creating the proper laws or legislature that's necessary just to keep people safe.
In most affluent nations, technology is advancing at such a rapid rate that regulatory policies sometimes cannot keep pace with it. And you were the co-chair of the Association of Chiefs of Police, and you took great initiative with respect to fighting cybercrime. Tell me about that.
The Toronto Police Service, even though it's a municipal police agency, it has an international footprint. Toronto is called a world within a city for a reason, over 200 languages. Well, you would be the one teaching me all of this. But the bottom line is this. There are units that are looking at what is happening in the world 24 hours a day. because it has impact in the city of Toronto. So something happens in country A, citizens from that country that live here may behave differently. They may protest, or they may do other things, or they could do something disruptive. So you have to have that knowledge in advance. It's important that, you know, the better outcomes, it's when an organization has a plan, not a reaction.
Because of your extraordinary experience in dealing with organized crime, you know, I think I explained to you earlier, in the field of copyright and implementation of the piracy that we have in the IPTV industry with the Android boxes which are out there, where technology has been used to really manipulate and illegally sell content, which are, you know, available, for which we pay huge license fees. It's not only us, it's affecting the entire industry in this country, where to a tune of about $900 million a year in underground economy has been created. Money laundering is taking place. What does one take to convert something of this from a civil to a criminal offense?
Well, I guess it would start with the awareness piece and making sure that government is aware of its importance and the impact that it's having. And then from there, you know, making sure that the federal government really takes a better look at it. It's definitely just listening to you and the impact that I didn't realize that the impact was that severe, which means the community probably doesn't understand that type of impact and how it causes loss of jobs. So I guess the more the public becomes aware of its impact, I mean, even me learning that amount of impact is key and critical to go forward.
We're at a point whereby, what made you change your mind to actually run for the mayor of the city of Toronto?
The city's at a turning point. I have watched the city moving in the wrong direction. And you know, when I was chief, I belonged to an organization called the Major City Chiefs Association. And these are all of the largest police agencies in North America. And I remember sitting down and talking with these chiefs, and the one thing that they would say over and over again was to never let disorder or petty crimes, don't ignore them, don't normalize them, because if you normalize them, it moves exponentially, and then your city completely changes. And I took great fascination going in those cities and walking around and looking, because at the end of the journey, I'd come home and say, I'm so glad to be back in Toronto. But now Toronto's changed, and we have normalized so much that we should not be normalizing. When I'm downtown going to meetings and walking around people, and others are ignoring them and walking around them too, this used to be shocking, but it's not anymore. So I'm running because City Hall needs to make sure that they prioritize where things need to be done. And for me, it's about crime and disorder, not normalizing it, dealing with it, making our city safe again, because when it's safe, it's healthy, and when it's healthy, it's a vibrant city.
As a cop for 38 years, I've seen firsthand the carnage caused by addiction. And in the last 3 years, it's gone through the roof. We see it all around us. And the politicians at City Hall, they're the ones who let things get this bad, and now they're making them worse. These politicians want to decriminalize drugs like crack and heroin. I can't think of a worse thing to do during an addiction crisis. Treatment, not more drugs, is the answer.
That's why I'm running for mayor, to hope that, you know, in that seat, the discussions that are had are prioritized.
There's been unprovoked attacks on innocent victims in the subway system, in public transit, which never really happened many years ago. It's just been a recent trend. Now, you've already explained about the mental illness and the programs. Is there any special plan that you would put in place that would sort of monitor this or prevent this from happening more regularly?
I put a plan together for the TTC, and I know it is the best plan. You know, I have run that organization for $1 billion plus a year and 7,400 people. I've been delivering public service for 38 years, so this is my business. And when it comes to making sure we create a healthy culture of safety on the transit system, it is so important, especially the subway system. The ridership is down 30%. That is revenue that is not coming in.
That's primarily because of the post-effects of the pandemic, I presume.
Absolutely. We knew, there were experts from around the world that said that this pandemic is going to have a huge impact on people that live with mental health. Social isolation is the #1 enemy, and even teachers are saying some of the students have come out of this thing differently. But more importantly, to the general public, when we add that factor to homelessness and the impact it has caused without putting the proper funding in to help has caused this situation. So my plan for the subway system and for the TTC as well, first for the subway system, hiring more special constables. A uniform presence acts as a deterrent. It really, really does. Making sure that it's the Toronto Police Service that takes over, because the Toronto Police Service, that's their expertise. TTC is to get people to and from the destination. Security and well-being is the law enforcement. So when Toronto Police takes over, you'll have a higher level of training of special constables. They will be special constables. There will be more special constables, and they will be riding on the subways. I've never seen one on there, and I've been riding the subway for years. Newcomers don't come with bikes, and they don't come with cars. They rely on a transit system. This is the largest one in our country. There's a lot of work to be done, but right now, we've got to get them back on that subway.
What qualities did you feel that you've inherited as the chief of police, and the strengths that you have gained that you think will be really helpful for you to become the mayor of the largest city in this country?
Well, government's role is to help communities. I have been in public service for 38 years, not just public service at a desk, but out there in the public, dealing with mothers, dealing with crime issues, at town halls, knowing all of the city very well. I have a lot of people skills. I've learned to listen and grow. I've been problem solving. I put all those things together, and that separates me from everybody else who has sat in a riding and sat behind desks. This is a hands-on job. Our basic role is to keep our community safe and to make sure we create the environment for other things to happen. Small businesses, understanding the importance of that, making sure we can bring businesses in, large businesses, so that we can create jobs, decent paying jobs. All of those factors, that's what makes Toronto the great city to live in.
You know, what a pleasure having you in the
Thank
show,
you so
and I
much.
want to wish you all the best, by the way, and good luck and my regards to your family, and keep up the great work you're doing, and wish you all the best with your campaign as well.
That's great. Thank you, Sham. It was a pleasure being here.